Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I'd like to call to order James City County Wetlands Board meeting. Ms. Farmer, could you roll minutes, please?
Mr. Apperson?
Here.
Mr. Roadley?
Here.
Mr. Gussman?
Here.
Mr. Dunn?
Here.
Mr. Waltrip?
Here.
I have protocol requires that I read a couple of things to start off with. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to preserve the wetlands and to accommodate economic activity so as to prevent their depopulation. And minutes, want to have any comments on the minutes? Minutes will stand approved as read. I have to recite this now. This is our protocol for the meeting tonight, the public hearings. The outline for tonight's public hearing will be a staff presentation, followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. Then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anyone wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record. And everybody who wishes to speak have done so, the public hearing will be closed and discussion among the board will start. At this time, I'd like to start with Mr. Long, case WJPA 21-003.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, watershed planner, here to present WJPA 21-0043. Mr. Matthew Roth of Roth Environmental LLC has applied for a wetlands permit on behalf of Mr. Ryan Lee, Westport Neighborhood Association, Inc., to install a kayak and canoe launch and community pier on property located 3475 Westport within the Gordons Creek watershed. Property is further identified as James City County Tax Map Parcel Number 362050001A. The applicant is proposing to install a kayak and canoe launch and community pier. Pier shall be constructed along an existing pathway used by residents that is also proposed to be upgraded for resident safety. Additionally, there will be a gangway and floating dock installed. There are no permanent impacts to the wetlands. However, emergent freshwater herbaceous species may incur shading impacts as the pier is proposed to be approximately 2 feet above ground elevation. The impacts of the wetlands are anticipated to be approximately 500 square feet of wetland vegetation. The applicant has already expressed interest in purchasing mitigation credits for the non-tidal wetland impacts, and the pier will be installed to avoid impacting the forested vegetation. Staff would require proof of purchase of wetland credits or a surety of $2,500 to guarantee this purchase. As published in the Virginia Register on July 11th, 2005, the revised Wetland Mitigation Compensation Policy and Supplemental Guidelines, Regulation 4 VAC 20-390-10, Virginia, as a Chesapeake Bay program partner, is committed to achieve a no net loss of existing wetlands acreage and function in the signatory's regulatory programs. In order for a proposed project to be authorized to impact wetlands and compensate for the wetland loss in some prescribed manner, the following 3 criteria must be met. All reasonable mitigative efforts, including alternative siting, which would eliminate or minimize wetland loss or disturbance, must be incorporated in the proposal. The proposal must clearly be water dependent in nature, and the proposal must demonstrate clearly its need to be in the wetlands and its overwhelming public and private benefits. If the proposed project cannot meet one or more of the above criteria, the project must be denied or must occur in areas outside of the wetlands. Should it satisfy all 3 criteria, however, compensation for the wetland loss is required. The sequence of acceptable mitigation options should be as followed: on-site, off-site within the same watershed, mitigation banks in the same watershed, or a payment in lieu of fee. If compensation is required, it should be conditioned to the permit. Staff has reviewed this application and finds that this project meets the 3 criteria outlined above. Staff has reviewed the above application and recommends approval of the application as presented. Should the board wish to approve the application, staff suggests the following conditions be incorporated into its approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary local, state, and/or federal permits required for the project. All development activities located in the special flood hazard area shall comply with Article 6, Division 3, Floodplain Area Regulations of the James City County Zoning Ordinance and receive all required approval and permits prior to the commencement of such activities. That a surety of $2,500 be paid and in place prior to commencement of work in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the no net loss policy of Virginia or evidence of credit purchase be provided before construction begins. And that this wetlands permit for this project shall expire on September 8th, 2024 if construction has not begun. And that an extension for this permit, if an extension for this permit is needed, that written requests shall be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than July 28th, 2024, 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. We do have a brief presentation for this hearing tonight. Again, Mr. Matthew Roth has applied for a permit on behalf of Ryan Lee of the Westport Neighborhood Association at 3475 Westport. Thank you. The applicant's request is to install a kayak and canoe launch and community pier at the above vicinity map. The parcel outlined here in blue with the purple dividing line being the Gordon Creek watershed. An aerial photograph of the parcel where the project location is set to be in place. Some topography, it certainly slopes off where the trail leads down towards the area that the kayak launch is proposed. The floodplain as it affects this property. And a site plan that has been submitted by the applicants. The area in yellow being the proposed kayak and canoe launch, gangway and pier. It's a little hard to see, but the blue area dashed line is the edge of water. And the area in green, 2 areas in green showing the edge of marsh on the seaward side and landward side. Some site photographs from the uplands looking down through the wetlands and out towards the creek. The area flagged is the center line of the pier. Standing at the edge of the marsh looking out towards the creek, that would be basically the edge of water as it is shown on the site plan. And looking back upland from the edge of water through the vegetated wetlands, again, the flagged area being the center line of that pier. Some photographs provided by the applicant of people currently using the area to launch kayaks and just needing to step through the wetlands and its need for a public community pier. Again, staff does recommend approval for this permit request, given that all other necessary local, state, and federal permits are required as they're needed. That all development activities located in the special flood hazard area comply with James City County zoning ordinance and receive all required approvals. That a surety of $2,500 to guarantee the no net loss of wetland policy is required, or evidence of the credit being purchased prior to construction. And that this wetlands permit shall expire on September 8th, 2024 if construction has not begun, with any extensions for this permit be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than July 28th, 2024, which is 6 weeks prior to its expiration date. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Questions, please?
Mr. Long, in your opening statement, you made some comments about no permanent impacts, and then you mentioned non-tidal wetland impacts. And now you also mentioned $12,500 for the purchase of wetland credits, and then I noted on your surety it's $2,500. Could you help?
Yes.
With that?
Yeah. So originally the surety was $12,500. That has since been changed to $2,500. And the wetland impacts that are anticipated are non-tidal wetland impacts. Not necessarily what the board is looking at or under the jurisdiction, but still requiring the credits to be purchased.
Would you care to go back to the plan view and show us the area that the board does have jurisdiction over?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley, I'd like to correct the record, please. It was my decision to bring this before the board because the Gordon Creek Watershed Watershed Management Plan shows this area as tidal. Mr. Roth has data that would suggest that it's non-tidal.
Okay.
I thought it would be better to err on the side of being conservative and take it to the board and have the board hear this case. So that was my decision, and that's why it's before the board.
Okay. So all of the wetlands involved are non-tidal.
According to Mr. Roth.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask a question, sir?
Absolutely.
The slide, the picture that we saw with the kayak being taken overboard, it looked to me like the cypress knees there, like there was a tidal situation there. It looked like it could have been a low tide situation. Is that on the site that we're looking at now?
Yes, sir. And in my opinion, water comes up and water recedes. It's a tidal situation. It's a freshwater tidal situation, but it's tidal nonetheless. Mr. Roth can explain his point of view from the Corps of Engineers. I'm not going to try to be a wetlands expert, but it's questionable.
Okay.
And I thought I'd err on the side of caution.
Thank you.
Can I see where it is on the county map again?
Yes. Oops, there you go. So this is,
You might
it's
go.
directly on Gordon's Creek. Here you go, I can zoom in on that for you.
I don't think the mouse is working.
Not so well.
Where's the main channel of Gordon's Creek?
That is,
You can see the campgrounds there on the left, so just follow it up.
yeah, this thing's not working so well.
No, I would scrap the mouse.
What's your question? The campgrounds
Neither
in
is
the
that.
left?
F5.
I think that open field area.
Yeah, sorry about that. I can't get to zoom in much, but that is along the main channel, just above that blue.
Peninsula and cuts all the way up, and that's like all the way at the head.
That,
So it goes all the way down there. I spent a lot of time on Gordon's Creek. That's
You know what, I think I paddled there.
yeah.
Okay.
that channel, Mr. Gussman, does go right up to the base of Jolly Pond Dam. And that's what we consider the main stem of Gordon's Creek.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think I'm familiar with that area. I've paddled in there a lot.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So typically, the permitted use, the construction and maintenance of piers and footbridges are permitted.
So this is they're generally permitted when they're private usages. However, they have to come before this board if it's a publicly used pier. Because this is for Westport as a whole, this is considered a public pier and then must be heard before this board.
Okay, thank you.
Is this gonna be a build-as-you-go deck to go out there to it, or is it, how is it gonna impact the cypress knees and stuff?
I will defer that to the applicant, and I think he can best answer the construction method.
Any more questions? This time, we shall open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this application, please come on up.
Looks good.
Good evening, Mr. Apperson and members of the board. Lots of good questions, and nice to be nice and cozy.
Mr. Roth, would you
Oh.
introduce yourself for the record, please?
I'm sorry, Matt Roth, president of Roth Environmental, 700 Prescott Circle, Newport News, Virginia. This one's up at the very upper reach of Gordon Creek before it turns into more of a non-tidal forested wetland. There's a couple stream channels that come down through that forested area, but when it gets to this portion, like you see on the exhibit here on the photo, just about the edge of our site, it opens up actually into the creek. The tidal, non-tidal distinction on this one was difficult. I went out at high tide. It had not come up and flooded into the the cypress knees that you saw on the picture with the gentleman carrying the kayak out. I think we're at the very edge of what is considered tidal, non-tidal on Gordon Creek. I think the water is probably tidal in a very low range in the creek there, but I don't think we're getting regular tidal inundation in the wetlands where they're crossing. Down farther to the south, where you have that point of land that comes out, that is definitely getting tidal inundation. You get more of an herbaceous type wetland area in there. But that's kind of the way I was seeing it. And like Mike said, to err on the side of caution, better to come before you and let you know what we're going to do. So what we've got is a 3.9 acre parcel that's owned by the Homeowners Association. You can see in the top part of the lot, there is a stormwater management pond there. And as you come off of Westport, the circle, there's an entry road and a gravel drive up to the top right. And then as it comes around the pond, it turns into more of a trail, and you can actually see it on the photo there. Trevor's taking the mouse down. And so that's an existing path that's been down to the creek for years. What has happened over the years is the residents have used that to access Gordon Creek, canoes, kayaks, even to go down and fish. And so over the years, being that they're industrious, they've come in and installed some mulch along the path to make sure that it's a little more stable than just going down a relatively steep slope that's just hard-packed clay and sand. The entire lot slopes to the southwest, to the creek. And at this portion of the creek that was shown on the plan view, we're 60 feet wide from edge of water to edge of water. And the wetlands we are crossing are floodplain areas. When we have rain events like we're having right now, and you get a lot of runoff, the creek will stage up and they will inundate these areas. For our design, we wanted to cross the wetlands and not fill anything with pier. And so the total length of our pier is 67 feet. So we start just on the upland side of the wetlands and extend down following the existing path that the folks have created over the years there. So we're not going to be clearing out mass vegetation or anything. There will actually be very little vegetation clearing with this. We only are going to extend approximately 11 to 12 feet into the water from the edge of water. So we'll have Trex type decking starting on the right, and it'll come all the way down to the gangway that'll be right there at the water's edge, and that'll go up and down with the water, and then the actual floating pier will be there on the end, and that's the kind of the largest rectangle there on the end. The parameters we used for siting this, we wanted to use the existing trail, although we did look at alternatives. We were going over a very narrow part of the wetlands, considering what else was there, and there was no need to clear any forested area to get there. We're going to use the existing path and the existing area that's cleared out. We did look at the area to the north where you see that angle a little bit farther up from the pier right there, but it's a lot steeper in that area. So it'd be a lot more challenging for folks to carry kayaks or other watercraft down to the water than what's already there. It also would have had to remove a few trees if we were to go through that area. The decking will be made out of Trex type material. And from what I've seen in the photographs that the applicant has sent me, the actual end of the pier will be more of a plastic type material that'll float. The Trex type material will be 2 feet off the ground to avoid any of the cypress knees that are there. We didn't want to bring it up to the normal 5-foot level that we would install a pier for fear of falls and things like that when people are carrying kayaks out. So for safety, we wanted to keep it low, and the applicant understood that by doing so, we would be incurring secondary impacts to the wetland areas by shading. So the wetlands will still be there, but we may just, if it shades the vegetation out, that would technically be an impact. That's why we're offering the mitigation. If there was anything else. The total wetland shading impacts for the actual pier portion of it are 338 square feet, And then the area over the water is 126 square feet, so we're right about that 500 square foot total impact area of what this thing will cover. And like I said, we're gonna purchase our mitigation credits prior to any sort of impacts on the project or any construction taking place. And as far as Mr. Waltrip's question about how they're gonna construct it, from what I understand, they're gonna build as they go. And so they're gonna build the pier and drive piles a little bit farther out, connect, and then kind of keep going out. So they're not doing any sort of matting or anything like that in the wetland area. That has been recommended to be completely avoided. And I'll
Thank
take
you,
any
sir.
questions.
Any questions?
The mitigation that you're purchasing?
Yes.
What are you purchasing?
1/100th of an acre of non-tidal credits, which comes out to be right around 4,500 square feet. Or, I'm sorry, 450 square feet.
450 square feet, yeah. I would like to ask you a question, if that's a satisfactory answer for you, sir. Is that,
It's an answer.
okay? Yes, sir. When you build the pier, is it possible that instead of using symmetrical, even spacing for the piers, the pilings that you drive, that if you come to a cypress knee, that the people, the reason I'm asking this is because if you destroy the cypress knee, we've been of the opinion, I say we, the folks that I used to work with, that it's a portal for disease.
Sure.
To enter into the plant, and it would be easy enough just to adjust your spacing. You can build anything, if you want to, and you can a cross bridge or anything to build a pier without disturbing the knees. And I would like to ask you also, while I'm talking to you about this, have you seen any Phragmites?
We have farther down the creek.
I would like to ask you and let Michael, our staff, check this a year later. I want to be sure that we don't start any new colonies from any activity that goes on there. And if anything is started there, then the homeowners association will be responsible for removing it. I don't want to see any more Phragmites get into the creek than is already there. And it'd be up to our staff here to decide whether or not any, what measures ought to be taken. None to begin with, and if it's there, then there can be none when you're finished, is the way we look at it.
I understand.
Okay.
No, I think we can definitely incorporate any sort of spacing to avoid the cypress knees with the piles. That would be totally reasonable. And then as far as the invasive species, yeah, we'll take pictures prior to, and then a year later.
Whatever our staff requests, that's what I'd like for you to do on this, to be sure that there's none there now and there's none when you're finished.
That'd be fine.
Okay. So, any more questions? Yes, sir.
Procedural question for staff. I understand the rationale behind the applicant's request in terms of it being non-tidal. I got a sense from staff that it may be considered tidal. The law requires a site-specific evaluation in order to make that determination. And as you know, that is done by elevation. I'm willing to concede that they can forego that, but if we're hearing this and we're issuing a permit, we're doing that based on the fact that it is a tidal wetland.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, no permit's required from this board. So for us to issue a permit, in my mind, it requires tidal mitigation of the presumption that it is tidal. Otherwise, there's no reason to hear this application.
I would agree with you 100%. The options, there's several different ways you can go about, as you know, checking to see if it's tidal. And one is to do a very months-long elevation study. I didn't see the need or justification to put Ford's Colony Homeowners Association through that process. If that was a procedural mistake, then that's on me. And if the board chooses to determine that this project does not need a permit, then that's the board's purview.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to move and ask our attorney what our next step should be. Should the board decide whether we need a permit or not for this case, or give us some advice on how to proceed from here?
You can anyone on the board can make a motion that, the permit's not required. And but if you wanna proceed on the application, then you would just proceed as normal.
I feel like,
Can
I would treat this
can I
as
just-
title,
I'm sorry, sir, you're not finished yet, are you?
No, I'm finished.
Okay. I would like to suggest that the board decide this right now, before we go any further. If that's okay with y'all, if somebody make a motion to vote, or how you want to handle this, but I prefer myself to vote for that they need a permit, because I want to see it done under the permit process. But discussion from the board right now, and decide this issue right now.
I think it looks title to me, and if they didn't come forward with a study proving otherwise, I'm gonna treat it as title.
I agree. Someone want to say something, please?
If I may,
Yes, sir, please.
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Rodley's point, regardless of whether the waters themselves are tidal, the vegetation that's impacted is non-tidal, and the board actually does not have jurisdiction over subaqueous tidal waters. Because we determined that it was, or close to that juxtaposition of tidal and non-tidal, that interface, and it being a commercial project, similar to marina projects we'd see for First Colony or Kings Mill or Governor's Land, we determined that it had to come before the board. I don't know if that's legally defensible, but the wetland impacts themselves, I would agree with Mr. Roth, are non-tidal wetland impacts, but the waters were tidal, in my opinion. Therefore,
I don't know that you can have both.
well,
Tidal waters and non-tidal wetlands. That's just my opinion.
I understand. It's a
Your
tricky
opinion matters a
situation.
Great deal, sir. Your opinion matters.
So I just to muddy the waters, so to speak, throw that in there for you all.
And Mr. Rodley, that was one of the things he and I had looked at originally, was the vegetation in that area. And it didn't seem to be your standard tidal, freshwater tidal wetland vegetation that would be in there. It was more of a non-tidal mix of things. A lot of carex, some juncus, things like that. As we got downstream, we got the peltandra and we got more things of that nature that do get the regular tidal inundation. So in that sense, that's one of the reasons that I was calling it non-tidal. And I visited the site 3 times, twice during a high tide event, and it was not inundating these areas or even coming close to coming up over the bank of the creek.
So not within the 1.5 times the mean tide rate?
No, no.
It sure looked tidal to me, Matt, when I saw. That's the only thing I can say. I have not
I
looked
know.
at the site, but and that's where I'm coming from. It looks to me like it's tidal.
Trevor, could you go back to the photo of, the recent photo that you took? Down through it. Oh, go back one. This is right along the edge, and I'd be willing to say that maybe that little piece that you have, you mind if I get up and point?
ahead, no, please.
Maybe this little area in here, and this looks like I don't call it a bankful event, but it's a lot higher stage than what I saw at the times that I was out there. And so this in here almost looks tidal, but as you get back away from it, it did not appear that that was a tidal type system. And so that's why I claimed that it was non-tidal.
Can we see the other slide, Trevor, with the boat? There.
And again, this is more indicative of what I was seeing, is you had more of a steep drop right at the edge. And, you know, right along through here, and I'm not sure this is the exact location that will come, probably it's pretty close. But it was more of a steep drop in there, right off the edge. And then back through here, this is obviously taken in wintertime. It just didn't have that look and feel like it had tidal water that came into it. That was just my opinion when I was out there.
That's fine.
Yeah.
No problem. More, Mr. Gusson, I think you had something you wanted to bring up, please,
Well,
sir.
no, I just, unless they came in with evidence, you know, with the title study, I say we treat it as title.
Would you care to make that motion if discussion's finished, if the board wants to decide something?
Well, I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution to grant the permit.
I believe we have some more speakers. Public
Oh,
hearing
I'm
is still
sorry.
open.
Okay.
Ms. Sally Walls with Fort Valley Homeowners Association is here to just say a few words.
Ms. Walsh?
Hi,
Thank you.
thank you for your time. Can you please?
State your name and address for the record, please.
Sally Walls, 103 Plantation Drive, Williamsburg, in York County, my residents. We are aware and certainly sensitive to the sensitivity of the environmental impacts of this project and wish to proceed, you know, cautiously and with all respect to the environment and the creek itself. So that's our intent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much for your comments. Anyone else wish to speak, please?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Justin Worrell with Virginia Marine Resources Commission, and I'm starting to regret volunteering to come to this hearing for our engineer who couldn't make it tonight. This is a little complicated. I looked at this earlier, and please understand I'm not making any comments to try and sway the board into making a positive or negative decision, but a couple of things I just want to raise to make sure I understand, VMRC understands what's being presented. I briefly or quickly looked at the application, and I didn't notice any low and high tide elevations and indicators on the plans. So it was very interesting to hear the staff say multiple times they feel it's non-tidal. The agent says it's non-tidal, and we haven't heard anyone with all due respect, the authority to say that it is tidal. So I'm a little concerned that maybe, as Mr. Rodley pointed out, does the Wetlands Board, who is charged with hearing and deciding if tidal wetlands projects, if this board should be hearing this project, at least as it relates to the wetlands impacts. Also, the staff mentioned approximately 500 square feet of what they called vegetated wetland shading, but they were also referenced as non-tidal wetlands. Then the agent referenced 338 square feet of vegetated wetlands. So there's some confusion there. And I'm also concerned with the offer, if you all approve this or consider approving this, then accepting non-tidal wetlands bank credits to cover for what you would be acting on as a tidal bank, as a tidal project. So again, not trying to influence a decision pro or con for this case, but I think there does need to be some due consideration as to whether this is even jurisdictional for the county wetlands board. And then if it is jurisdictional, maybe some consideration be given to either tabling or deferring this until you get some authority from VIMS as your scientific advisors or someone that is a little more familiar with the tidal influence at this particular position in the creek. And I say this basically, with regards to VMRC's position is reviewing all wetlands decisions made by counties and cities. And if there's an appeal made by the applicant or freeholders, they would come to us directly.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak, please? If not, we'll close the public hearing and open it up.
Well, the VMRC has spoken,
Yes.
even though they don't want to influence us. Maybe we should defer it until we get an answer on,
Have them do the study.
yeah, or,
The applicant would need to request a deferral. Otherwise, you have to make a decision tonight.
Mhm. Well,
Can I say something? I'm trying to read the position here of our voters, and I don't think anyone is particularly against this project. If you are, you can speak up now, but I think the problem we're having is whether or not we should even be looking at it. That's the point, and our attorney here gave us some good advice, and I think that's probably been changed, but you look like, Matt, you look like you want to say something, and we're ready to listen to you.
I mean,
Go
understand the
ahead.
board's concern.
Go
I mean,
ahead.
if we need to figure out if it's title, we need to figure out its title, and we'll
Yeah.
defer and
But you
come
have
back
to
next
ask, you
month.
have to ask, your applicant has to ask for the deferral though, sir.
We're asking for a deferral.
All right, thank you. So recorded. Anyone have any problem with that? Okay.
no,
Okay, just-
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments there, and everything. Thank you. Let's move on.
well, we didn't vote on it.
No, we don't have to vote on it if it's been deferred.
No, you just leave the public hearing
Yeah,
open.
leave it open.
Oh, okay.
And so as we defer to the next meeting in October.
Thank you.
Wait a minute, we don't have to make the board doesn't have to make a motion to defer?
As long as the public hearing stays open.
Okay,
And it's on the record that Mr.
Okay.
asked for it.
Is that okay with you, David?
okay.
All right, we'll move on to case WPJA 210045, Mr. Wall.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, here to present WJPA 21-0045. Mr. Tim Davis of VHB Inc. has applied for a wetlands permit on behalf of Mr. Justin Doyle, James River Association, and the National Park Services for the installation of a dock, kayak, and canoe launch and landing on property located at 541 Neckaland Road within the Mill Creek watershed. Existing on the property is a gravel pathway that is proposed to be paved, which will lead to the proposed kayak launch. In addition to the proposed kayak launch, the applicants are proposing to construct an 8-foot by 63-foot fixed pier attached to a 60-foot by 40-foot gangway. An 8-foot by 8-foot floating landing and a 16-foot by 60-foot floating dock are also proposed associated with this project. A 4-foot wide soft kayak launch is associated with this project and will require approximately 2 inches of excavation and 4 inches of backfill material in order to reach the mean low water line. There are approximately 1,310 square feet of temporary vegetated impacts and approximately 493 square feet of permanent impacts associated with this project. Project will require 391.5 square feet of tidal freshwater mitigation credits as described above. The applicants have proposed the restoration of an existing wetland marsh area consisting of eastern red cedar, groundsel tree, and various grasses. This area is currently filled in with gravel and was once likely used as a boat launch. The applicants have indicated that the proposed mitigation site can provide up to 3,000 square feet of tidal wetland emergent credits as needed. As published in the Virginia Register on July 11th, 2005, the revised Wetland Mitigation Compensation Policy and Supplemental Guidelines, Regulation 4 VAC 20-390-10, Virginia as a Chesapeake Bay program partner is committed to achieve a no net loss of existing wetlands acreage and function in the signatory's regulatory programs. In order for a proposed project to be authorized to impact wetlands and compensate for the wetland loss in some prescribed manner, the following 3 criteria must be met. All reasonable mitigative efforts, including alternative siting, which would eliminate or minimize wetland loss or disturbance, must be incorporated in the proposal. The proposal must be clearly water dependent in nature. The proposal must demonstrate clearly its need to be in the wetlands and its overwhelming public and private benefits. If the proposed project cannot meet one or more of the above criteria, the project must be denied or must occur in areas outside of wetlands. Should it satisfy all 3 criteria, however, compensation for the wetland loss is required. The sequence of acceptable mitigation options should be as follows: on-site, off-site within the same watershed, mitigation banks in the same watershed, or a payment of an in lieu fee. If compensation is required, it should be a condition of this permit. Staff has reviewed this application and finds that the project meets the three criteria outlined above. Staff has reviewed the above application and recommends approval for the application as presented. Should the board wish to approve the application, staff suggests the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary local, state, and/or federal permits required for the project. All development activities located in the special flood hazard area shall comply with Article 6, Division 3 floodplain area regulations of the James City County zoning ordinance and receive all required approval and permits prior to the commencement of such activities. And that the wetlands permit for this project shall expire on September 8th, 2024 if construction has not begun. And if an extension of this permit is needed, a written request shall be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than July 28th, 2024, just 6 weeks prior to the expiration date of this approval. A brief presentation above. Again, this application has been submitted by VHB on behalf of the National Park Service and the Historic Parkway on property located at 541 Neckaland Road to install a dock, kayak and canoe launch, and a landing. The above vicinity map shows the parkway as a whole and the area of which the James River Association has set up headquarters. An aerial photograph, the parking lot area outlined above shows the approximate location of the James River Association building and the pathway that runs, the existing gravel pathway that runs through the woods here down towards the area of the proposed kayak and canoe launch. The topography of this site, gradual slope down towards the water from the parking lot and building. The floodplain as it affects this property. And a site plan of which has been submitted to county staff. The pier installation outlined here in blue and mean low water also in a lighter shade of blue. The gangway and pier existing here, and the limits of disturbance outlined in black above. Cross section of the construction, and some site photographs that were taken for this project, looking out towards the creek. A little bit further back, through the wetland area. And looking back towards, upward through that area where the pier would be constructed and the pathway leading back to the parking lot. The flagging here indicating the center line of that gangway and pier. And the gravel parking lot, or the gravel path that exists. This is the area of which the wetland compensation and mitigation has been proposed. Like they said earlier, it was likely filled in to incorporate a boat launch in that area, but and staff does recommend approval of this application, given that the applicant obtains all other necessary local, state, and or federal permits required for the project, that all development activities located in the special flood hazard area comply with the James City County zoning ordinance, and that this approval of the wetlands permit shall expire on September 8th, 2024, with any extensions be written to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than July 28th, 2024, just 6 weeks prior to the expiration date of this permit. Thank you. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Who owns the property?
So the property itself is on the Colonial Parkway and National Park land. The applicant and the people who have, I would think, have rented the building is the James River Association.
No questions?
Is the proposed mitigation area currently a tidal wetland or above tidal elevation?
It's currently, I believe, in the applicant can correct me if I'm incorrect. However, I believe it's a little bit above current wetlands because it's been filled in over the years.
Thank you.
No questions? Thank you, Mr. Law. This time we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward.
Hello, board members. My name is Tim Davis. I'm with VHB. I'm the agent for the applicant. Just a couple of points I want to make just to clarify the project. The property is owned by the National Park Service. I'll let Mr. Doyle with the James River Association explain better the relationship between the association and the Park Service. This is somewhat of a joint type situation where both parties really benefit from this project. The site was chosen because of the access with the existing building and the parking facilities, so there's no new construction that's needed there. It will be for public use, for educational purposes, for classroom study, for other things that the James River Association is involved with. The mitigation site is actually right downstream or upstream of the thoroughfare on Park Service land. The Park Service made it clear as their policy that because of their no net loss policy on their own property, they would not allow a project that would not have mitigation on their own property. So we had to have mitigation on the Park Service property, and they were very kind to show us multiple sites that they felt would work, and we felt like this was a fantastic site. It's an old fill road bed that goes all the way across the neck of land marsh to an old, we believe an old boat ramp. You can see it on photographs from the 40s or so. And a lot of it's been washed away and is part of the non-tidal, but there are some areas that are still above tidal that have red cedar and Cerisa lespedeza and other upland plants that are gravel is still there, that the Park Services would be very excited about having it, having it restored. So we're actually pretty excited about this in terms of, Park Services needs as well as mitigation needs for this particular project. I'm here to answer any other questions you may have. Our engineer, Vic Desai, who is with VHB, is also here to answer any other technical questions on construction. And we'll let Mr. Doyle, if he has anything to say, I'll turn the table over to him.
Questions?
Tim, just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
The area of the mitigation, I understand that it's a mosaic. You have some upland, some perhaps wetland areas within the boundary of your mitigation area. But is it fair to say that there's at least 500 or 493 square feet of upland that will be restored?
Oh, easy. It's a long linear dirt road that was filled in the marsh years ago. And there's more than ample amount of mitigation available to cover this project. And the Park Service in our discussions have even talked about, taking it a step further and doing more restoration just because they're the Park Service, and that's one of their goals is to restore systems.
So did I understand correctly that the entire 3,000 square feet of restoration would be applied to this project?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak, please?
Good evening. My name is Justin Doyle with the James River Association, and like Tim said, we are occupying this neck of land site through a cooperative agreement with the National Park Service with the intention of improving the site to better accommodate and facilitate education programs, primarily youth education, but in the future, public programs. And when I say programs, I'm speaking about on the water program. So a typical day at this site, as we envision it, would be students taking a field trip to the site, being dropped off at the site, and spending the day with James River Association educators, immersing themselves in environmental education, spending time on land learning about watersheds, water quality, but also having the opportunity to get out on the water in canoes, kayaks, stand-up paddleboards, and also via an education vessel, a dead rise that is a part of our fleet. And so this project is it's critically important to our goals at Neck of Land, and really appreciate your consideration of it. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'd like to ask you a couple questions. I've worked with the James River Association group with the Phragmites on College Creek. Many times they use my boat ramp and stuff over there, and you all do a good job, by the way. I'm a little confused on, you said it was 3,000 feet of area. Are we talking the old road that used to go, the bridge that used to go with the bridge that went on to Jamestown Island?
I have to defer to Tim.
Because the old road goes across the marsh, because I can remember, I've even got pictures of the old bridge that was crossed over to the island before they built the thoroughfare in there. Is this back where the brickyard, where they had the sand pit, where the big barge is there on the side? It looks like to me where that building that you have there in the parking lot. I'm confused. Is it there in that turn, or is it over where the road that went through to the old road that went across to the island?
I think Mr. Desai just confirmed that it's the old road that went across to Jamestown Island.
So that's over here. Okay, now okay, I understand. And there's some pilings and stuff there in the water there where it goes across. All right, I know now where you're talking. Okay.
And just to be clear, that road on Neck of Land, as it leaves Neck of Land, is upland fill. It's clearly upland, and then it just slowly, as it goes further out across the marsh, it just starts to dissipate to the point that it becomes part of the marsh. You can see some brush, some shrubs, where you have, emergent marsh on the adjacent edges. If we were to do a delineation, which we would do at some point once we do the full design of this, it's not going to encompass the uplands. Is not going to encompass the entire road going out to the open water. Most of that is marsh, but there are some other areas that
I am familiar with that area there because my family built the Jamestown Yacht Base and we dredged it out, so I'm very familiar with that whole area there. But I was confused on whether it was where the building was or whether it was the road that went over to Jamestown Island. And it is the old road that goes to Jamestown Island. Okay, thank you.
More questions? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to speak, please? I don't see anyone up, so we'll close the public hearing. Comments, your pleasures?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the permit for Wetlands Board Case WJPA 21-0045 at 541 Neckoland Road.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next case, WPA 21047, Mr. Long, John Tyler Highway.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, Watershed Planner, here to present WJPA 21-0047. Ms. Carla Havens, Mid-Atlantic Resource Consulting, has applied for a wetlands permit on behalf of Mr. Jeffrey and Ms. Amy Van Desant to install an offshore sill with beach nourishment and bank grading on property located at 1489 John Tyler Highway within the Chickahominy Creek watershed. The property is further identified as James City County Tax Map Parcel 343030004. The applicants are proposing to construct a 152 linear foot stone sill with a beach nourishment to mitigate the shoreline erosion occurring on the property. The area landward of the sill is proposed to be planted to install beach nourishment, and the existing bank is proposed to be graded at a 5-to-1 slope. Impacts from the proposed grading should be revegetated as mitigation. The applicants are proposing to access the site from the uplands, and there are no vegetated wetland impacts as anticipated with this project. Project is proposed between mean low water and mean high water. Therefore, this project must be heard by the Wetlands Board. As published in the Virginia Register on July 11th, 2005, the revised Wetland Mitigation Compensation Policy and Supplemental Guidelines, Regulation 4 VAC 20-390-10, Virginia, as a Chesapeake Bay program partner, is committed to achieve a no net loss of existing wetlands acreage and function in the signatories' regulatory programs. In order for a proposed project to be authorized to impact wetlands and compensate for the wetland loss in some prescribed manner, the following 3 criteria must be met. All reasonable mitigative efforts, including alternative siting, which would eliminate or minimize wetland loss or disturbance, must be incorporated in the proposal. The proposal must be clearly water dependent in nature, and the proposal must demonstrate clearly its need to be in the wetlands and its overwhelming public and private benefits. If the proposed project cannot meet one or more of the above criteria, the project must be denied or must occur in areas outside of the wetlands. Should it satisfy all 3 criteria, however, compensation for the wetland loss is required. The sequence of acceptable mitigation options should be as follows: on-site, off-site within the same watershed, mitigation banks in the same watershed, or a payment in lieu of fee. If compensation is required, it should be a condition of this permit. Staff has reviewed this application and finds that this project meets the 3 criteria outlined above. There are no anticipated vegetated wetland impacts associated with the proposed project. Even though there are no vegetated wetland impacts, the applicants are proposing approximately 1,216 square feet of wetland planting in the form of common 3 square and soft stem bulrush, because this project is coinciding with a living shoreline. Additionally, the applicants are required to restore 3,000 square feet of resource protection area with switchgrass due to the proposed bank grading. Staff has reviewed the above application and recommends approval of the application as presented. Should the board wish to approve the application, staff suggests the following conditions be incorporated into its approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary local, state, and/or federal permits required for this project. All development activities located in the special flood hazard area shall comply with Article 6, Division 3 of the Floodplain Area Regulations of the James City County Zoning Ordinance, and receive all required approval and permits prior to the commencement of such activities. That a surety of $1,000 be paid in place prior to the commencement of work in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the revegetation of the bank. And the wetlands permit for this project shall expire on September 8th, 2024 if construction has not begun. And that if an extension of this permit is needed, a written request shall be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than July 28th, 2024, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. For a brief presentation, again, the project proposed is at 1489 John Tyler Highway. And the applicant's request is to install a sill with beach nourishment and associated bank grading. The vicinity map above shows the subject parcel outlined in blue right along the edge of the Chickahominy River. An aerial photograph of the parcel and the area of the project that has been proposed. Topography, it's a very flat site up until you get to the edge of water, which it drops off, and there's scouring along the bank. The floodplain as it affects this property, and the site plan that's been submitted to staff. The bank grading occurring up at a 5-to-1, or excuse me, yes, 5-to-1 slope. The proposed sill outlined here in yellow. Mean low water occurring just outside of the sill, and mean high water higher as well. A cross section of the proposed work. Again, this 5-to-1 slope for bank grading. The the area of beach nourishment existing in between the bank grading and the proposed sill, and the proposed sill here. Some photos from the site. You can see the scouring occurring along the bank. This a little further down. The PVC pipe is the area of the sill. Again, staff does recommend approval of this exception request, given that all other necessary local, state, and/or federal permits are required as needed for this project. That all development activities located in the special flood hazard area comply with James City County zoning ordinance and receive all required approvals and permits prior to the commencement of such activities. That a surety of $1,000 to ensure the beach nourishment and plantings of the upland slope. And that this wetlands permit for this project shall expire on September 8th, 2024 if construction has not begun, with any request for an extension be submitted in writing to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than July 28th, 2024, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date of this permit. Thank you. Be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Before the board starts, I do want to go back to the site plan and point one thing out. We did get a, due to, I believe it was the Corps of Engineers recommendation, there is a 5-foot window in the sill that's in this general location here. Ms. Havens can explain that when she does, when the public hearing is opened.
Mr. Wilson, just for clarity, the plan view, if the yellow is the sill, the plan view doesn't jive with the cross-section. Cross-section shows the sill starting at mean low and extending landward.
I think I can explain that. I believe the actual picture itself was shifted on that screen.
Okay.
And it should be, or was probably originally down.
So it should be over top of.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
those should all overlay.
All right.
Oh,
yeah.
I understand.
More questions? Okay, let's open up the public hearing. Anyone wish to speak, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, good night, members of the board, good evening. I'm Carla Havens with Mid-Atlantic Resource Consulting, 1095 Cherry Row Lane, Plainview 23156. And aren't you glad it's not a commercial pier before you? This is the Barrett's Ferry Landing parcel on the southeast side of the Chickahominy Bridge. It was subdivided into 7 lots a couple years ago. They're long, skinny lots. The sections along the waterfront vary from about 150 to 300 feet. What's before you this evening is Lot 4. Next month you will see Lot 3. And Lot 3 will also be a continuation of the sill here and the bank grading. Before you this evening is the Vandesand project. And as you saw in the cross-section, it's not a big beefy sill. It's pretty much a low-profile sill. The water is very shallow from the embankment out into the river, and then it finally drops hundreds of feet offshore. 500, 600, 700 feet, and you're probably all familiar with that, but that was the main reason for not putting some huge structure out there is there wasn't a need for that. The trees have all fallen and eroded away. On the right-hand side, as you face the river, there is a cypress tree that's sort of acting as a little breakwater, and yeah, the blue line is over top of it, I believe. So you can see that cluster of cypress out in the water. The proposed sill is basically from the right-hand property line into that little cove where the trees, yes, right there. Yeah, that stretch there is the 152-foot section. And they'll be coming in from the upland, placing the stone, placing the sand, grading the bank back, and we'll let Mother Nature take over from there.
Questions?
Yep.
You know, just a comment, any place where you see a cypress tree like that, it was high land at one time, you know that. And it's very easy to see, you know. Gene Hoffmeyer owned that property, it was a friend of mine years ago, and he's always of the opinion that that was the James River. I see you decided it's the Chickahominy, so, I'm not exactly sure which one of y'all is right. But, I've always been told that was the Chickahominy River, I don't know.
According to the ADC Street Map Book of 1996, it is the Chickahominy. They make the break point at Point No Point across over to the point on the Charles City side. Yeah, I originally put it was the James, and then I was corrected. So it's Chickahominy, as far as I know.
Mr. Hoffmeyer was right then.
Yeah, and Mr. Hoffheimer still owns Lot 1.
Yeah.
He's closest to the bridge.
His son owns it, yeah.
Okay, yeah, still in the family.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. Anybody else wish to, have anything to say? If not, we'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, this seems relatively straightforward. If there's no other dialogue or comment, I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the permit for Wetlands Board case WJPA 21-0047.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Guessman?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
The motion carries.
According to my itinerary, next consideration is board consideration. Anyone have anything they wish to bring up? Special privilege, Michael, Mr. Wilson, anybody got anything? Motion to adjourn,
So moved.
we are adjourned.
Okay, let's go right into the Chesapeake Bay Board meeting. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to protect against and minimize pollution and deposition of sediment in wetlands, streams, and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay. Ms. Parman, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Apperson?
Here.
Mr. Roadley?
Here.
Mr. Guessman?
Here.
Mr. Dunn?
Here.
Mr. Waltrip?
Here.
Any corrections to the minutes from the August 11th meeting? The minutes stand approved. Let's see. The outline for tonight's public hearing will be a staff presentation followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. And the public hearing will be open. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so. Once called upon by the chair, all public speakers must state their name and address for the record. After everyone wishing to speak has done so, the public hearing will be closed and the discussion among the board will start. First case is CBPA 21-0128 for 155 Warehams Point.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, here presents CBPA 21-0128. Mr. Kyle Polk of the Structures Group has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Kings Mill Community Service Association for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a retaining wall on property located at 155 Warehams Point within the Warehams Point subdivision and the College Creek watershed. The parcel was platted in 1993 after the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Total lot size of this property is 1.05 acres, of which 55% is located within the RPA. The applicant is proposing to construct a retaining wall behind two existing lots located at 164 and 166 Warehams Point, equating to approximately 120 square feet of impacts in the landward 50-foot RPA. The applicant is concerned with erosion on the property and has proposed the retaining wall to stabilize the slope. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts to the RPA equals the plantings of 3 shrubs. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a retaining wall. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a retaining wall is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied by Chapter 23 of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance and of the James City County Code to other property owners similarly situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 of the James City County Code and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-imposed or self-created, nor does the request arise from conditions or circumstances either permitted or non-conforming that are related to adjacent parcels, and that reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval of this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve this request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into its approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and/or local permits as required for this project, including a building permit if necessary. The submittal of a mitigation plan equaling 3 shrubs be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division. That a surety of $250 be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings. And this exception request approval shall become null and void if construction is not begun by September 8th, 2022, with any request for an extension of this exception be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than July 28th, 2022, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date of this permit. For a brief presentation, again, the applicant requests is to construct a retaining wall on property located at 155 Wareham's Point within the Kings Mill subdivision and the College Creek watershed. The parcel itself outlined here in blue. It is owned by KCSA property and is right behind these two houses here. So the topography of this site does slope off fairly drastically down towards the water, and the applicants are beginning to experience some erosion and have fears of that erosion continuing on. The resource protection areas that affects this site outlined here in green. Again, the project does occur within landward 50-foot RPA. And the site plan that's been submitted to staff with the red dashed line indicating the 100-foot RPA and the red solid line being the proposed retaining wall occurring behind 164 and 166 Wareham's Point. A cross section of the retaining wall itself, we have rock stone occurring upland of the retaining wall with an underdrain downspouting to ground level on the other side of the retaining wall. Some site photographs. The area has been staked out with these wooden stakes that can be seen within the photos. The site, as they have described, is beginning to experience some upland erosion at the edge of the bank, or at the edge of the slope, excuse me. And it is for that reason that the retaining wall is being proposed. Looking downwards towards the water. Again, staff does recommend approval of this application request, given that all other necessary local, state, and federal permits are required as needed. Then a mitigation plan consisting of 3 shrubs be submitted to the county. That a surety of $250 to guarantee these plantings be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office. And this exception request shall become null and void if construction is not begun by September 8th, 2022, with any request for an extension be submitted in writing to staff no later than July 28th, 2022. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have at this time.
Any questions for Trevor?
No, sir.
Okay, at this time I'd like to open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to address the board? Would anyone like to speak on this issue? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Discussion on the board.
Mr. Chairman, Trevor, could you point out in the picture again where the erosion is that's occurring?
Oops. I think the area of most concern is along this area here. You can see there's not a whole lot of grass growing there, and I was out on site and I tried to take pictures that, however, they did not. The real erosion that is occurring out there would not come through. It's not significant as it stands currently. However, they are beginning to get real erosion that's going down that slope as well, and I think their concern is that erosion will continue.
Okay, thank you.
Somehow, I don't know, I came into this meeting with a new appreciation for the need for permitting retaining walls and making sure they're designed properly. Any other questions from the board? Okay, can we have a, let's see, did I close the public hearing? Yeah, okay. Can we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the board vote to approve CBAP 21-0128-155 Warren Pond.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, our next case is CBPA 21-0079 for 6015 Richmond Road. The applicants have withdrawn this request. Let's see, the public hearing is open, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on this issue? Okay, then I will close the public hearing. And now, do we need a vote on this?
No, no further actions required.
Okay, no vote. All right, that one is gone. Under board considerations, our first issue is an emergency permit for temporary repairs at 5030 River Drive. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, staff took action on an emergency permit at 5030 River Drive due to a set of circumstances that were beyond the property owner's control. The adjacent property, the adjacent slope had failed. It was impacting his property. He does plan on coming in before this board or before the staff with a permanent solution, but before that could be designed and built and everything. There was concern that the erosion that he was now experiencing would continue, and staff did issue an emergency permit for him to get that repair underway. It matters before you just to get your formal approval on that action, with the understanding that in my approval to Mr. McSherry, I did condition it that the entirety of his project must be on 5030 River Drive unless permission is obtained from the property owner of 5032 River Drive, that all applicable erosion sediment control measures shall be in place prior to the start of the project, that no fees will be required for this phase of the project due to the emergency nature, that a permanent repair plan must be submitted to our office for review and approval no later than December 31st, 2021, that failure to provide a plan per condition number 4 will result in double permit fees for the erosion sediment control and double land disturbing permit fees, and that we will require no surety for this temporary repair. The plan before you is what was submitted to staff. This corner of the property has failed, and the basic proposal is to cut that back at a 2-to-1 grade and put filter fabric down and riprap over top of that. Mr. McSherry has been in conversation with me if he wanted to reduce the amount of riprap and and stabilize the upper portion of that. I would be amenable to that. Furthermore, the area of repair should not go down into Diaskin Creek proper in the Wetlands Board jurisdiction area. All 5 of you have seen this project over in this property in the last couple weeks. If I can get, oops. This is the 5032 property right here, and this is 5030 property right here. The emergency permit was only issued for 5030. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have on this matter.
Well, it was an emergency. I've never seen anything like that. So, in all my time on the board, I've never seen a disaster in the county like that. So I think you acted appropriately. I'm certainly in favor of granting the emergency permit for next door.
Yeah, absolutely, I concur. Appreciate you working with them and allowing it to take place and fixing the man's property. Appreciate it greatly that you took a personal interest in it and then got up there and got it on it.
I do know Mr. McSherry is here tonight. I don't know, it's not a public hearing. You don't have to allow him to speak, but if he would like to, and if you would allow him to, I don't see any harm in letting him speak.
I'm sure. Would you like to address the board? But go ahead, state your name for the record. So
Good evening, board. I'm Gary McSherry. My primary residence is 4706 Cary Street Road, Richmond, Virginia, but my secondary residence is 5030 River Drive. And yeah, this was kind of a catastrophic failure based on in my opinion, illegal activities, but I've got to shore up that property to protect my foundation. And the only question I have is the limitation of December 31st for a final solution. The final solution is going to determine primarily on the final disposition of the property next door. And I hope that it'll be resolved by that time, but my understanding is that could drag on.
We could work with you
Okay.
on that.
In case it does drag on.
Yes, sir. If it
Okay.
drags on past and you can't make the December 31st deadline, we can come back before
Right.
the board
Well, I can have
to
one design.
clarify that.
I could have one design ready by then based on a certain scenario, but there may be additional scenarios that could unfold further on down the road.
Understood.
Okay, that's really the only question I had or any comment that I had.
sure.
No reason not to be reasonable.
Yeah, we'll work with you on that.
Did y'all have any questions for me or?
No?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion regarding the emergency permit?
Motion to adopt the resolution to grant an emergency permit at 5030 River Drive.
Okay. Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Mr. Guessman?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, that concludes board considerations. Now, under matters of special privilege, we have listed on the agenda an appeal for the property next door where the slope failure took place, for 5032 River Drive. We were to consider this appeal tonight. However, the applicants have requested a deferral of this appeal. Mr. Wilson, you want to brief us on what's going on?
Certainly, I can give you a brief description of current status. Mr. Patterson and his counsel, Mr. Bean, who is present tonight, met with Ms. Parham and myself Friday afternoon to discuss potential resolutions at 5032 River Drive. We thought it prudent at that time to have Mr. Patterson ask for a deferral on the appeal to next month to allow the two parties to reach an agreement. And I would suggest to the board that they allow Mr. Bean to speak, to address the board, should he so wish to. It's easy for me to say.
I have a quick question I'd like for Mr. Wilson.
Yes,
So
sir.
We've been out there and we've seen the, we've seen that it hasn't been mitigated yet. How long will you allow how long will the county allow this to continue before at least emergency measures are taken?
That is an excellent question, Mr. Dunn. I wish I had an excellent answer for you. The position that staff is in is we can't force Mr. Patterson to repair his property short of going to court. Like as I said, we're in the process of starting to negotiate a resolution to that. The current erosion that you all saw that is happening would make the final cleanup of the creek, in my opinion, just take longer because more of that material is going to go into the creek that's in the uplands. When I met with Mr. Patterson very early on, I requested that he install a turbidity curtain in the water at the in the area of failure to at least protect the toe slope from boat wakes. He has not done that. I would make that same appeal to his counsel again. But short of that, we're not going to do anything at this time.
All the board members have seen it, and wow, I've never seen anything like this. When, you know, all the years I've served on the board, I mean, this is pretty serious. You know, I think probably speaking for the board, we can't let this drag out at all. If, you know, if we don't have a resolution by next month, I don't know if we have to authorize court action or whatever, if we have to vote on it, but if we don't have an agreement, I hope we'll be in court.
Any deferral, and you don't have to defer tonight, certainly, but if you choose to do that, it'll be placed on the agenda for next month. The goal, and I've met with Mr. Bean, is to reach a resolution that would, so that we don't have to go to court, because that is timely and costly for both parties. Certainly prepared to do that. You know, the county attorney's office will do that if we don't reach a settlement. But I think the issue that Mr. Bean has presented is that his client doesn't have the resources to make those repairs. So likely it would have to be a subsequent purchaser who does a lot of this work. So we're trying to work through the logistics of that.
Okay, well, but I think it's, speaking for the board, we don't want to see this delayed at all. And I'd like to, if there can't be a turbidity curtain put up, if the if the owner can't get it, I think, can we pursue the county paying for it and getting it out there? I mean, that's a lot of stuff that can be sloughing out into the
Can we
river.
pursue the contractor who did this to at least put in a turbidity curtain?
That's certainly an option that's still on the table. He's, of course, it would take some time to get into court. But the contractor was issued a notice of violation, and certainly Mr. Bean's client likely has a cause of action against him. But all those options are on the table.
Okay, but I'd much, all the legal stuff's gonna take it's not gonna move quick. Maybe the county can, I know we don't have a lot of, it's not something that's budgeted for, but maybe the county can go
Mr. Gussman, I can't promise you, but we will look into it.
Yeah, just look into it and then, bill whoever down the road, but let's get it, at least the turbidity curtain up.
Everything's going on there is fixable.
The curtain.
I mean, it's just gonna be a little more expensive as time goes on, but it's all fixable.
It is.
I'd like to submit
I
that
think
to
the
y'all.
turbidity curtain, the damage has been done. When the turbidity curtain's gonna catch what's on top, or it's not gonna be all the way down to the bottom, so, and it sloughed in, it went down and pushed out from the bottom. When it went out like this, your turbidity curtain's really, at this point, it's not gonna really do you any good until they start in there messing with trying to get it cleaned out. Then that's when you're gonna stir it up. I mean, I don't know that, I can't see that it's gonna be a real big deal putting the turbidity curtain up, except for visual, because the worst part, the water got behind it, underneath of it, and it just slid out underneath and slid down in the water.
There, if I may, Mr. Waltrip, there's also been some safety concerns expressed.
That could be.
And a turbidity curtain, well,
That
not
would- that would answer
expressly for that purpose, would
That-
certainly alert boaters.
More so than protection as far as slide or anything else. Okay, yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Mr. Bean, you wanna address us? or-
Yeah,
What's going on?
I appreciate your time. I'm Greg Bean. I'm with the firm Gordon Reese. We're here in Williamsburg out in Newtown, so I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. We are committed to working with the county to see if we can come to a reasonable resolution. That's why I met with Mr. Wilson and Ms. Parman on Friday. I think it was a productive conversation. We committed to put forth an offer of settlement to the county within the next week. And so, just so you know, and you might have been out of the property since then, the home has been demolished. Mr. Patterson is very frustrated with this due to the actions of the contractor and not obtaining the correct permits. This has been a saga for him, and he just lost his home. So it's been devastating to him, and on top of this, he has to deal with the whole failure. So he doesn't disagree that it's a problem that needs to be fixed. But it needs to be fixed in a smart way that can actually be accomplished, not in a way where the county's going to spend necessary money pursuing actions that might not be fruitful. So we are committed to putting forth an offer, and the deferral would just be until next month. And we would work with the county. If we can't come to an agreement, then we would present our full appeal to the board. Technically, we're in front of 3 boards, or 3 violations, so we have to go to the county supervisors next week. So we've got a lot of work to do, but we are committed to getting that before the county, and that's why I'm here. Mr. Patterson's got me involved. He's got legal counsel, so he's serious about it and trying to get this fixed. And I can work with Ms. Parman and Mr. Wilson in talking about turbidity curtains or whatever. He wasn't ordered to demolish the house, but he did that in good faith, knowing that was an essential step. So we're committed to trying to get this fixed how we can. So we would request deferral.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in to speak to us and letting us know what's going on. Hey, Ms. Porman, just a quick question. If things should move quickly in terms of a resolution, and I think the board understands the importance of moving quickly on this. I mean, we're having huge rains tonight, having heavy rains tomorrow. We're in the storm season. This doesn't require any kind of public notice, does it?
The appeal, no, it does not.
Okay. Can the board meet in an emergency session and give its blessing to it going forward if you reach a resolution more quickly?
We could call a special meeting. That would require some public notice.
But I think if we reach a resolution, the appeal would be dropped.
Right.
And it would not come before the board. Certainly, we could give a update to the board on what that resolution is.
You don't need our permission to go ahead with it.
No,
Correct, right.
If we
Okay,
reach
all
an
right,
agreement,
right.
if we reach an agreement, then I'm guessing Mr. Patterson would drop his appeal.
Right,
Okay.
that would be a condition of the agreement, I'm sure, on all parties.
Okay. All right. But if the board needs to meet in special session to move this forward, consider that.
We will.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other matters of special privilege? Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn?
Did we need
So
to?
moved.
Well, because this
Hold
is-
on.
Oh,
Yeah, because this is an appeal, I think it's maybe prudent to have a motion
Oh.
to defer.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to defer the deferral of this appeal, excuse me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Okay, and the motion carries. The appeal is deferred to next month.
We appreciate your
Okay.
time.
Thank you. All right, and do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, we are adjourned.